Hello, everyone. My name is Nicolle, and I'm here today to talk about internationalization and localization, and why they are important processes in your application in general. Does anyone here, besides the Brazilian people, knows what Eita means? No one? OK. So don't worry, it's not a bad language. I know that's the common thing to do when you learn a new language, that you learn the curse words first. I don't know what's up with that. But I swear, it's not a bad language. It's just an expression that we use when something unexpected happens. And by the end of the presentation, you will know why this word is there. And sorry. And why do I have a Brazilian, a Portuguese word in the title of my presentation? Well, I am from Brazil. I am a full-stack developer at LabCodes. I work mainly with Python in the back end, especially Django. And I have some works on JavaScript on the front end also. I am a huge fan of the Python community. I am part of the Python users group and a pilots group in my city, Recife. And I also organized a Django Girls back in 2017. And this year, I had the pleasure of organizing a Python Nordeste, which is like a regional PyCon in our region. So Brazil is huge, and so I flagged in this map here my city over there. And it's a very sunny region. It has a lot of great beaches for visit, so if anyone wants to spend some vacation in Brazil, I recommend you to visit Recife and give it a chance to amaze you as it amazes me every day. And as I said, I work at LabCodes. LabCodes is a software studio based in Brazil, and it is specialized in creating custom web products fitted for specific needs. So we believe that software should be built by fulfilling clients and user expectations. So our software is always aimed at solving problems and optimizing processes. It's an incredible honor for us to be here, to be part of this conference, to be giving talks and sponsoring. Two of my coworkers will be giving talks here. We will have Luan, that will talk about that technical debt tomorrow. And also Renato will be discussing about Django authentication on Wednesday. So if you guys are interested in these topics, just stay tuned and look for their talks on the next days. OK, so this is the agenda of this presentation. We will be discussing about the definition of internationalization and localization, and why they matter for your application, why you should know about this. Then I will go over some of the internationalization tools that we have available to build our Python or Django applications. And last, but definitely not less important, I will be present to you how we had to adapt our development flow to take internationalization into account. So I'm going to share a little bit of our experience working with it. OK, so let's start addressing the difference between localization and internationalization. Funny story, I didn't know what I18N or L10N meant until very recently, where I learned that they are numeronymous, which means that we have that there are 18 letters between I and N in the internationalization word. And the same thing for localization, like we have 10 letters between L and N. Just a curious fact for you guys, because I didn't know when I started working on this, and I just discovered later on. So localization is the process of adapting an application, a product, or even a document to be more user-friendly to customers from different countries and cultures. On the other hand, internationalization is the process of enabling localization of the product on the application. So it's like implementing a software in a way that it will know how and when to show different content depending on the customer's locale. And Django documentation perfectly summarizes this difference by saying that localization is done by translators, and internationalization is done by developers. However, this simplified definition of internationalization and localization may give the wrong impression that this is just about translating. This is just about translating your app. But actually, this process entails several other adaptations that you need to make sure that you review them to make your users from different cultures feel more comfortable using your product. So I will go over some of these examples that we need to take care of. Here we have a map illustrating the usage of different formats of date in the world. As you can see, countries colored with cyan, blue, green, and gray, they accept the format day, month, year. The ones colored in yellow, green, and gray, they accept the format year, month, and day. And as you can see, very few countries actually accept and use the format month, day, year. So let's say that you have a company based in the US and your product is shipped worldwide. How are you going to show to the on the website the expected delivery date to your customer in Mexico? You don't want to flip day and month around. It's going to be confusing for them. So how can you do this? This is another map, very similar, but this one actually illustrates the number format used in different parts of the globe. The countries colored in green use comma as decimal separators and dot as thousand separators. The countries in blue, they format the numbers the other way around. So dots are for decimal separator, and comma is used for thousand separator. So this can be very confusing. So how are you going to show the same number formatted for your American user or your, let's say, Brazilian user? So this is something you need to pay attention to. Talking about prices, I don't know, another example is about currency conversion. So if I'm browsing through Amazon, I don't want to see the products in US dollars. I want to see them in my local currency. I want to see them in Brazilian real. That's our currency. So it's important to provide these prices and other values correctly converted to your user. Another interesting one is bidirectional text and Unicode characters. It's a very common issue when bringing applications international. In this example here, we can see that the Wikipedia page adapts according to the selected language. So here we have the setup in English with the navigation bar on the left, which is pretty common for most pages on the web. And here we have the same page, but configured for Arabic. And as we can notice, the navigation bar migrated from the left to the right side because the language is written and read from right to left. So that's why you need to make an adaptation on your layout, your page layout, not only your translation. And there are several other aspects that we need to take into consideration when localizing our apps. There are some countries that still use imperial units instead of the nice and round metric system. So yeah, this is something that we still need to worry about, so you may need to convert some measures on your application. There are some legal requirements that may differ from country to country. For instance, those betting sites for sports or something like this are actually forbidden in Brazil. So if this is your business, you may need to consider another route instead of going to Brazil. When sorting and presenting a list, the way address and personal names are formatted, so should the family name goes first or the given name? Also, time zone, calendar, special holidays. And I know that we, as developers, we are so used to write code and documentation in English that we may not realize that actually there are only 360 million native English speakers in the world. And I know that's very useful to have a common language for us to communicate, especially with teams across the world. But regarding your final user for the product that you are developing, English may not be that universal truth for them. So even if the user knows how to read and speak in English, they may have learned since they are babies, I don't know. But it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be more comfortable interacting with your application using their native language. In fact, from the top 10 countries with most people using internet, only one is a native English-speaking country. So if you want to grab a share of the other market, you must be different. You must bring something new by catching new clients with an amazing user experience. So yeah, I hope that I gave you enough facts to point that I have convinced you that about the importance of localizing your apps. So now you must have been wondering how we can do this in our Python programs. So I'm going to review a couple of tools here that can help us with this task. The first one I'm going to start with is the GNU getText package from the translation project. This package actually offers a runtime library that supports the retrieval of translated messages, a set of conventions about how programs should be written to support message catalogs, a library supporting the parsing and formatting of files containing translated messages. So how does it work? This is just a simple Hello World type of app I called Eita app.py, where we are using the getText Python module to create a translation object for our app domain, specifying the locale directory that I called locale, and the language that I want to translate my strings to. I'm starting with English from the US. Then I'm assigning the getText function to underscore and flagging the string hello world. Here we have a string that I want to make it possible to translate. After flagging all the translatable strings in my code, we can collect them using the GNU X getText command line tool. So this tool just generates a PO file containing all the strings that we have flagged with that function, the underscore function in our code. So what's the PO file, what this thing that it generates? The PO file, which stands for portable object file, contains a list. It's just a list of entries. And this is the basic structure for an entry. So we may add some comments for translators, some references or flags for the string. And then we have the entry ID, which is going to be the untranslated string that we just flagged in our code, and the entry string representing the translated string. So when I run the command xgetText in the command line passing my Eita app file as input, this is the PO file that it generated. At the top, we can see that we have some metadata about the file, especially handy for giving some information about the project, about the translation process. And down here, we have a reference for where in the code that string came from, so line 7 of my Eita app.py file. Then I have my untranslated string as the entry ID in the next line, and an empty string in the entry string. If no translated string is provided for a certain entry, I don't know, you don't have still the translation for that, the entry ID will be returned, so the entry ID will be shown to the user. OK, so I have my PO file, and now I can start actually translating the terms that I have collected before. In this example, I'm translating our sample app to Portuguese. So I copied the file, the PO file, and generated by the xgetText command, and started to translate my terms. So I already put there Olá Mundo, that's the translation for Hello World in Portuguese. One thing that's important to notice is that the GNU getText library is going to look for your translated PO files in a specific folder path structure, which is going to be your locale directory, then the language folder, and inside the language folder, you must have a lc_messages folder, and inside that folder, you will have your PO file. And that's why I have to move around and change my folder structure to look like that. Now I have two PO files for the two languages that I want to give support in my app, English and Portuguese. And I organized my directory in a specific way that's expected by the library. So in order to use the translated strings in my code, I just need to compile the PO file into MO files using the message format command for each PO file. So I just need to go over each one of them and then compile each one of them. Now I'm able to change the language on my program to as many languages as I have PO files for. So I just need to change in my translation function over there. And if we run this code, it's going to, the string will be translated to Olá Mundo in Portuguese. Another useful internationalization service is the Python locale module. This module actually has access to the POSIX locale database, and it's very handy for formatting dates, numbers, and currency. Let's take a look at an example of date, number, and currency formatting using this library. Here, I am importing the module, changing all the locale to US English, and retrieving the locale conventions. Then, I proceed to format a given date and price. Just an example. Using the locale.format method, I can format my number without worrying about decimal and thousand separators. I'm just passing the grouping as true, so I want to use the thousand separators in there. Using the %x directive to format date, it will display day, month, and year in the correct order of my locale. And from the locale conventions, I'm able to get the currency symbol for that locale. So here's the output for that Python code. We can see that the date is following the format month, day, year. The decimal separator is a dot, while the thousand separator is a comma. And we have the $sign representing the US currency. So if I go back there in the same code and just change the locale to Portuguese Brazil and run the same code again, we will get a different output based on Brazilian conventions for formatting dates, that are day, month, year. And we will also have comma as a decimal separator, dot as thousand separators, and the R plus $sign, which represents the Brazilian currency real. OK, now that we know how to translate and format numbers and dates using just Python, I want to show you how Django can make our lives easier. Let's start with translations. So by default, internationalization is enabled when you create your Django project using Django admin. The translation module encapsulates that GNU library and provides the getText function already set up with the translation object. And the translation object is already set up based on the accept language header that's passed by the browser in your request. So all that Python code that we did before, setting up all the translation and assigning the getText function, this is already encapsulated by Django. And we can just jump ahead and just using the getText function in our view. For translations, we can flag translatable strings in both Python and the template code. Besides the standard getText function that I just showed you, Django also have the ability of lazy translation. So the flagged string, which means that the flagged string will only be translated when the value is used in a string context, such as a template rendering. This is especially useful for translating like variables name or the help text attributes in your Django model. On the other hand, we can use some special tags in our template code to, once we load the internationalization tags, the trans template tag translates just a single string, while the block trans tag can mark as translatable a huge block of strings if you want to. So it's up to you. Regarding those GNU command line interface, DjangoAdmin also provides an equivalent command for that one, especially the two that I just showed you. To collect all strings marked as translatable in the code, you just need to run DjangoAdmin make messages command for each locale that you want to give support to. So you just need to run this command for every language. And once you create your locale folder in your project workspace, Django is already going to create the correct folder structure for you with the LC messages folder and everything. And to compile all PO files, you just need to run the DjangoAdmin compile messages. If you don't specify a locale, it's just going to compile everything that it finds. So you're good to go. I'm going to show you a little bit how does this work on the browser, so you can understand what I mean by not needing to do anything. So just change here. OK, so you guys can see that, right? So I have here a simple page, hello world. It's just returning that string, OK? My view is just like sending this string back to the template and rendering the template. That's simple as this. So if I go here to my settings, I'm using this in Chrome, but this should be able to change in any browser that you may use. If I change here my language to Portuguese as my preference and move that to the top, and reload my page, it's going to identify that and translate my message to Portuguese. So what just happened is that I changed the settings of my browser to, instead of passing English in the accept language header, it's going to be passing Portuguese. So I was able to generate a PO file for Portuguese, translated all the terms, and compile that. Django already captures the accept header language and makes the correct configuration on the GNU getText module. So yeah. So now about format localization. Format localization is also enabled by default when you create your Django project. It formats dates, times, and numbers displayed based on the current locale. This locale is also obtained from the accept language header, so it works the same way as the translation bit. Just a special reminder that to enable 1,000 separators, by default, when you display any value on your Django application, you may want to use the use 1,000 separators settings in your project settings, just if you're going to use in every value that you have. So here I have a small example about also date and price. And we have a form here that has a date, that's a date field, and a price, this is a decimal field. And to make sure that it's going to take the user locale into consideration when receiving the input in the form, I just need to indicate the localize attribute for each one of these fields. So I indicate that as true, so they should be good to go and receive the correct value based on the user locale. So let's see an example of that. If I change here, now I have a symbol that form in a template. And here, reminding that I am in Portuguese. So I'm in locale of Brazil. So let's say that I'm here and I forgot about that, and I just want to input the current date. So let's say September 23rd of 2019. And then I'm going to put any price here. And if I hit submit, it's going to give me an error because, hey, this is an error in Portuguese that's saying, please input a valid date. So it's not considering my input as valid because for them, they're expecting the format of Brazil locale, which is day, month, year, and we don't have a 23rd month in the year. So if I change my locale back to English, it should be good to go. But you notice one thing that came out wrong? My price, I had comma as decimal separator, but I changed my locale to English, so now it captured my comma as 1,000 separators. So now my price jumped to 12,000 over there. So this is something that you need to pay attention to. And here we have the format. So if I go back here and just change back again to my Portuguese locale and reload the page, it's going to give me the date in Portuguese. And also, the 1,000 separator now is a dot, and the decimal separator is a comma. So just to illustrate how that works. And now, I would like to give you some information about time zone, how time zones would work in Django. I know this is a pretty difficult topic. It's very hard to work with time zones, at least I think so. It's very confusing. I mean, I am jet lagged right now because it's like 4 hours of difference from Recife to Los Angeles time zone, so it's quite messy. But how time zone would work in Django. So if you enable time zone on your project, all the time information is going to be stored in the database in UTC time zone if that is your default time zone that you put in your settings. Only aware date time objects will be used internally for any calculations, any comparisons that you want to do. And these datetime objects will be converted to your user time zone when displaying information in templates or forms. One important thing that we need to understand before working with time zones in Django is the difference between naive and aware datetime objects. So naive datetime objects don't have the TZ info attribute configured in the object. And this attribute is just a value that indicates an offset, and it's the offset of the time zone. So if you just want to do a timestamp using the datetime default library and use the function now, by default, it's going to give you a naive datetime object. However, when you are working with time zones in Django, as I said before, you need to work with aware datetime objects that have that TZ info attribute set. So Django already gives you a time zone module that can facilitate that for you. So whenever you need to create a timestamp taking into consideration the time zone that's aware, our aware datetime object, you just need to use that and use the now function to do that. Another interesting thing about time zones is how to determine the current time zone for your user. So when we saw before about translations and formatting, I said that the accept language header was being used and was informed by the browser. But we can't use that information to determine the local time zone. If you say that your language is English from the United States, this doesn't mean, it doesn't inform me which time zone you're in. You can be in the West Coast, in the other coast, so which time zone you're in. So the Django documentation actually invites you to actually let the user select the time zone. And you can store this in the session, or you can store that in a user profile if that's something that your application have. Another option would be also to discover the user's time zone using some JavaScript libraries. Me personally, I have worked with Moment.js time zone, and I was able to figure out the time zone for the user pretty easily, pretty straightforward. So you can try to do this with JavaScript too. So I have just an example here for time zones. I have some alarms set up, I think, but let me try to set my time zone. So here, all this information about all this list of time zones you can grab from the PyTZ module that is already installed when you install Django. So you can have access of all this list. This is all time zones that they support. So I'm here in Recife's time zone, so let me change that to, I think that he is Los Angeles, right? So if I change here to America, I can't find it. Yeah, way down. Oh, yeah, found it. Thank you. So now I'll set my time zone to Los Angeles, and it's going to store in my session. So now I can set an alarm, let's say for tomorrow. And I want to wake up at 7. So here I have mine in. So if I go here to my Django admin, it's going to show me that object. Let me increase a little bit here. It's going to show me that alarm object that we just did. But if I go back and change back to Recife, it's going to show me a different hour, because in Recife we are 5 hours ahead. So it's going to give me another time. And here in my admin, it's going to give me a note down here that's going to indicate how many hours I am different from my original date that was set by the user. So this can be very helpful for you when you try to troubleshooting something. If something happens, your user puts some date in and you don't know what the time zone was, this can give you some more information about that. OK, so now we know how to do formatting of dates and numbers. We know how to do translations. We know how to work with time zones. But how does this change the development process, if it changes at all? So we had the opportunity of working in an internationalization project back at LabCodes. And one of the main things that we had to change was our deploy process. So we needed to adapt our deploy process to include the translation process in between. So we had this stage deploy where we would put our changes in and then wait for some validations for the client in order to proceed to production. But now we had to not only put everything in stage, we also had to send any new or any updated terms to translators. So let's say that I just built a new page on my web app that has this, I don't know, dozens of new words that I just created. So I need to pass everything to the translator so they can translate that to all the languages that we support in that application now. We also needed to take care of integration tests for different locales. So now, whenever we were doing, or the testers were doing any tests, they would not only test the functionality per se, but also if that worked in different locales in different countries. And our production deploy would only be approved when all terms were being translated. So it was something that we need to take into consideration because the production deploy would not only depend on my team, on our team of developers that work closer. We were also dependent on the translation team. So this is something that you need to take into consideration. And yeah, that's basically the message that I want to pass to you guys. I hope that you find that internationalization is actually a fundamental step in design and development process. Don't do as we did, because we had a project that was up and running, several months, several users, and we suddenly got the news that we needed to expand to support Canadian users. And we had to translate everything to French. We had to convert our prices and unit of measures to accommodate Canadian users. So when we got the news, we were very shocked, and that's where the Eita comes from, because we had a lot on our plate, and we still had to do this. So don't do as we did. My recommendation would be, if you are in the beginning of your project, pay attention to that and try to include internationalization in the design process of your application. If that's not the case, if you're already down the road, you're just building it, or even just maintain it, my recommendation would be to follow the Boy Scout rule and try to flag all the strings. Whenever you are working with a piece of the code, try to look for any strings that haven't been translated yet, or mark any numbers that need to be specially formatted for different countries. So you can do this step by step, even though it's not requirement right now, but trust me, it's going to be a requirement soon. So just follow this. I hope this is a nice information for you guys. And yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed and you leave here with some more information. And that's it. Thanks.
I actually have a question on regarding the deployment process. Do your translators edit the PO file directly usually, or how does that handoff work?
Actually, we integrated with a translation platform. We have several of them. If you type in on Google, we have several examples. Because typing in the PO file, it's it's a plain text. It's not very usable. So what we did, we uploaded this using their API to, I don't know, Transfax or SmartLink. We have several platforms that do this, and they just parse it out and then show to the translator in a very much nicer way. So they could work the translations. It gives some suggestions, and it can give you some more context about the string. It's a pretty nice tool. We have several. So we actually use that to make it easier for the translators.
Cool.
How do you handle translation when you're dealing with a front end, like, say, React or Vue?
Actually, Django has a catalog for working with JavaScript. It can capture, it exposes the getText function to your JavaScript code, and you can do that there. In this project that we had to internationalize, I was using Angular 1, actually, and we used their system of translating. It was basically just a huge dict with the mapping between the key and the words to be translated, and you just need to put in the correct folder. It worked pretty similar to what Django does. One thing, though, that we noticed that we were using some strings in the CSS file, like for arrows and stuff, like yes or no thing. So we had to change that because I don't know how to do internationalization in CSS, and probably it's not a good idea because it's not good to have like a string hard-coded in your CSS. So this was something that we figured out in the process, so we need to change that and put the strings back in JavaScript where we could translate.
Thank you. I actually have a couple of questions. One of them is, any tips on how to handle the front-end design for right-to-left text, for the Arabic text?
We didn't do that. When I saw that Wikipedia did that, I was also curious, but I didn't have the chance to research how they do this, but it's pretty amazing. I don't know how they did that, but hopefully not something like if and else in your code, but something a little bit smarter, but I don't know how.
Okay, cool. And my second question is, how do you handle translation for things that you store in the database? Would you keep multiple fields for each language, or how would you recommend doing that?
Well, actually, we didn't have to change anything in our database for that project, but currently we are in this stage of translating something that we have in a data store. We are actually using Elasticsearch for a lot of things. So what we did, we have this child document. For each one of the documents with those strings, we actually extracted those strings, put the key, the ID, the string ID in it, and then we have child documents for each one of them, for each language that we want to provide to. So this is the tricky part. Whenever we retrieve that document, we need to check what's the language that the user requested, and then do the mapping correctly. I don't know how we would do this in a relational database because I have had the chance to work on it, but on Elasticsearch, this is how we are doing it. It seems to work, but I'm not sure about the performance. I'm still afraid that there is something there that we'll have trouble, but it's a work in progress. Thanks.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Here is a towel.
Thank you.